Hello again.
Hi, how are you today?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. So what we're talking about today?
So, what is our spreadsheet? I'm not prepared. This is what happens when we improvise.
Improvising is good. You don't know what will surface through improvisation.
So, welcome to today's episode about the appeal of AR for neurodivergent people. That is the theme of the topic, and yeah.
So before we get started, I just wanted to mention about ChatGPT and something you said on the very first episode about how sometimes ChatGPT can show more empathy than, say, a professional or a professional therapist. And I had this experience recently where I didn't quite get what I was looking for from my therapist, and then I went to ChatGPT, and I was like really surprised by the level of empathy it provided me. It felt quite validating. So I'm sort of rethinking my position a little bit there. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, because I've been seeing lots and lots and lots and lots of these videos online. When you're on neurodivergent slash autistic TikTok, I've been like seeing this and also experiencing it myself, and it's nice to hear you had one of those experiences.
Mm.
And what did you make of it?
I thought it was really interesting. It felt really validating. I tried not to go too far down the rabbit hole because I didn't want to get into this mode of, well, you didn't say this, but ChatGPT said this, and yeah, so I just took it more as a bit of an experiment to see how I'd feel, and it felt quite validating. And I learned that there's another tool, I can't remember, I think it's Pi Chat or something, which is supposed to be even more empathetic in terms of the human kind of component of engaging. So some people I'm on a Discord channel with use that one. So that's really interesting. Yeah. But I'm also very keen to get into neurodivergence with you today.
So I think one of the things I'd like to discuss with you as well is, like, before we go into the depth of it, what algorithm is. Okay, and the reason is because I think algorithms are important to understand, so we can, so I can explain some of the concepts. Can you say a little bit, like, on a technical level, what an algorithm is in AI and how it operates?
So I'm going to keep this very like at a basic level so that everybody can understand. And an algorithm is essentially, it's just like a recipe, like how you would have a recipe for a program to carry out certain actions. So imagine if you're baking a cake and you've got all the ingredients, and the ingredients in the context of AI is most likely data. Let's say data is the ingredients, and then you kind of put those ingredients together. So in this case, you would feed the algorithm data, and then it's like a recipe. And then you get, once you get like an output, or once that recipe is done, you get the finished product. And essentially, the algorithm is the recipe that then results in the output, which is like the final product or some data, or in the case of ChatGPT, dialogue. So essentially, that's what an algorithm is. It's just a series of steps written in different types of languages. And if we get into a bit more technical element of it, it's essentially it's kind of those steps in a particular language. You take in some data, you do some calculations or some whatever needs to happen, and then you get an output, and then the underlying functions of the algorithm translate that into like machine code. So that's kind of like a very basic description of what an algorithm is.
So thank you. And now I can add a little bit of story to what you explained. So I'm autistic, and I studied at least 6 or 7 years psychotherapy, counseling. Never talked a single session about neurodivergence or different neurotypes. I walked through, through life, constantly feeling like I'm driving on the wrong side of the street and not sure why. I often thought because I'm a Middle Eastern person, with and that was the main reason. But it was an algorithm that showed me who I was. So, and I tell you story how. TikTok shows you content that you find interesting, right? There's an algorithm that does exactly the recipe, looking at what you're interested in and then showing you more of that, right? So I started seeing TikToks of content creators who were autistic. And the patterns they were describing were like, they really, really fitted how I was feeling and how I was experiencing the world. But I've never met people who are, who have low support needs but are autistic, right? And because of that algorithm, I learned that I'm autistic. I then went on and got a formal diagnosis, because obviously I don't trust algorithms, like we all don't, and we have all these moral considerations like around misdiagnosis, etc., pp. Right? So this is why it was important for me to to really get into what is an algorithm and what does it, right?
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So I just want to take just a step before we get into it and maybe explain to the audience who may not necessarily know what neurodivergence is. Are you able just to give them a brief explanation of neurodivergence and maybe even some of your experiences around that too?
So neurodivergence is a is a way of reframing neurodifferences where labels have not been helpful, or where you couldn't put someone under a specific umbrella, right? So it's a catch-all phrase for autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, giftedness, high intelligence, personality disorders fall on bipolar disorder, and all sorts of other conditions are lumped in a way of trying to depathologize experience of differences that are ingrained in your wiring, and which you can't really change. So you have to adjust your environment to to be able to function in the world. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think it's good to give the audience, a number of those conditions so they can really understand that, we may be talking about one or two things here, but it encompasses a lot more than the things we're going to talk about. And then I just wanted to go back to the algorithm helping you to understand your neurodivergence and just explain a bit about that. And I use recipe, and that is a very simplistic kind of explanation of an algorithm. So just to add to what would have happened is whatever tool you were using, let's say TikTok in this instance, would have learned about you through the algorithm. So in a simplistic sense, it could be what you click on, what you viewed, and then it would have fed that data like similar to like ingredients into this recipe, and then produced content or content that may fit with what you're experiencing. Hence you would have got suggestions for videos that were geared towards autism, because it's learned that about you and your behavior and the content you're consuming. So similar to a recipe, again, feeding in the input data, which is like the ingredients, and then getting something out of that after that it's gone through that recipe, is essentially how that would have worked. And I think in that sense, tools like TikTok are helpful when they're not trying to sell you stuff or polarize you, because you wouldn't necessarily have come to that conclusion yourself or through traditional like Google search or something. So, you know, it is, you know, it's not, sometimes we like to lump things in our society as like it's either good or bad, but you know, this is again one of those things where a social media tool, which was initially most likely designed for good, is actually doing that and being helpful to people.
Yeah, and it's a, you know, it has a huge autistic community on that. That is, you know, really like wonderful. And of course, there's now commercialization happening and all of that, which makes it a bit more tricky. So that like, you know, for me, something around self-awareness is, I think, where it has been really helpful for me personally, and I've seen a lot of people on the apps as well of telling their own stories and giving their testimony of how they figured out they were autistic. And this is, you know, we don't get to see that, right? And because of my obsession with bias, you know, like confirmation bias, so I'm looking at it and I'm, you know, getting confirmation. I did go and sort out formal diagnoses, but, you know, that's not something everyone can easily access, because it comes with a cost. And another thing within that difficulty is, you know, self-diagnoses of autistic individuals. If somebody self-diagnosed themselves as autistic, it's pretty accurate. They're probably 99% likely to be autistic. However, if they tell people about their own diagnosis, a lot of, you know, because the awareness is not there yet, what it means to be autistic, a lot of people go, oh, but you don't look autistic, or you don't behave autistic, or, well, you are functioning okay, right? So again, this is part of the community I'm talking about with low support needs, which have, like, you know, been under the radar, and, you know, became vocal, and, you know, with rise of social media, you know, more visible. And there's also within the community quite some complexities, because people with high support needs, you know, sometimes feel invalidated or in conflict, right? Which is also not great, because, you know, it's so diverse. You know, it's a spectrum. It's called a spectrum for a reason, and you know, it's like really very diverse how autism manifests in us humans.
And it takes me back to this paper I read where they were talking about neurodivergence and kind of the therapy setting and psychological setting, and I think the one thing that stuck out was it said if you met one autistic person, you met one autistic person, which is essentially what you're saying here. I just want to take another sort of a step back, because you've given us a lot of useful information, and first I want to kind of just touch on how you felt when you received the autism diagnosis, and then my follow-up question would also be around the invalidation you received before when you thought you were autistic, or after, from other people. So it's up to you in which order you want to answer those.
So you know, because of the low support needs, that, you know, and I'm saying that because that can change so easily, right? Because for the vast majority of my adulthood, I did have low support needs. So, you know, when like I was constantly doubting, is this possible? Is this possible? And the diagnostic process is really stressful, because you have to go through through your childhood, through your experiences of growing up, and draw out information. And because it's so hard to reconstruct, you're asked to bring in like a parent or caregiver or a sibling who can help with complete the data set. And for me, like when I first thought about it and disclosed it to people, I was lucky because I disclosed it to my then partner, and he goes, yes, you are autistic. Yes, that explains everything. And just for context, I have a lot of sensory sensitivities, especially smell and sound, and my partner at the time was really struggling with that because I was just so easily, like my nervous system was so easily activated. So he had all this time of this experience, and he was the first, like, which was really like validating. And to that regard, I was really, really privileged that I had people around me who actually got it in some way. However, I saw in my friends and colleagues who are discovering their own neurodivergence, it's a lot more different. And it's a lot more different if you're female, particularly.
Can you say more on that?
Technically, yes, but I'm also a bit cautious because obviously I don't want to disclose information that is not mine to disclose.
Oh, that's understandable. I just want to explore. Did you experience any invalidation? Maybe it might not have been close friends or family, but maybe from acquaintances or colleagues or anybody else.
Not directly. I didn't, I didn't have any invalidation so far. I can't recall anything. I mean, maybe through the grapevine, somebody said something, or like, but I couldn't care less. It's most of the time when I disclose I'm autistic, people believe me. Why would I lie about that? Why, like, it's not like, hey, and by the way, I'm autistic, disabled. It is a disability. And no, so I was lucky, but I see it a lot. I see it a lot in my context, without disclosing like too much about how.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah,
it happens a lot, especially if you're female or not white.
Okay. So what I want to touch on also, as we do talk about tech a lot on this podcast, is around your experiences of using technology as an autistic person. And this can be technology in general, AI, and I also, if you could, touch on the kind of social component of that, if you've got anything to say around that in terms of just socializing and interacting using technology too, if you could.
Okay, so for context, right? I don't want to make this about autism only, but for context, autism is a social communication problem where I, for example, I don't always get the in between of a message, right? So, for want of a better word, neurotypicals might say things like, "Oh, that's very good what you've done there." Okay, and they actually mean it's shit. Okay, but I go, "Oh, okay, that's very good. I don't think it's good, but anyway, if you think so, okay, right?" So I don't get the subcontext, like the context of So reading between lines I find incredibly difficult, whether that's in writing, whether that's in verbal communication. So I miss social cues, and because I am so aware of it, most of my time I keep assessing if there's a subtext in the message that the person said.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not helpful, because then everything suddenly it could have this subtext, it could have this, and it might mean this, what the person said, right? So there's like this process going on in my brain, assessing about what information is meant as it's communicated, or whether there's something underneath. So with ChatGPT, there is a way for people who have difficulties with, reading between the lines, to just drop it in and to say, hey, what does this mean? And have a conversation with it. Like, I think there might be some subtext. What do you think? And it goes, it could mean this and this and this and this, or it might be genuinely meant as it is, right? So it like just gives you, like, it takes off the burden of you doing it in your head by having a sounding board to assess some of the information you're receiving from other people. That's one element I find it very, very helpful for me. The second point I find I would like to make is approximately 10% of UK population is dyslexic. So that's from the British Dyslexia Association, and English is my second language. So I don't have a formal diagnosis of dyslexia, but I'm doing the classic things like, forgetting words, losing letters, not reading full sentences, right? So the processing of information is like, not like somebody who is born in this country and doesn't have dyslexia, right? And can read and write and construct sentences and all of that, right? So the second way I find it really helpful is like, I write a block of text, and I know there are words missing. I know there are typos, the grammar is not correct. I throw it in, and it edits my content, right? That I have created in a way that is readable for the other person.
Okay. Yep. And how does that make you feel?
Less disabled. And this is the point. The moral outcry about AI and its dangers is, for me, like, it feels to me, as a person who's autistic, disabled, feels to me like ableism.
Yeah. Well, the people who have the outcry, from my perspective, tend to be the ones who were creating the systems to begin with, and now there seem to be some sort of something going on. But from my perspective, I find it pretty far-fetched, some of these outcries that happen. There are legitimate, issues with AI around bias and certain kind of things that come into play based on who's created it and they created the data set. But overall, like things like taking over the world and all that kind of thing is very far-fetched, because still, at the end of the day, it's a mathematical algorithm that processes data and provides an output. There's nothing in it that's magical. The only elements of magical are if your algorithm is so convoluted, you don't know what it's doing. And that's really the onus lies with the developers and the people creating it, to not end up having such convoluted algorithms that they can't, test against the algorithm, or predict the outcome of the algorithm, if that makes sense.
And so the frustrating bit is, like, this is already, like, spell checkers, like, this is already here for a while, right? And when you put your things through tools like Grammarly, you're using AI already,
Mhm.
Right? It's really frustrating. And people like, oh, this is like just cheating. No, it's leveling the field.
Mhm.
Another concept I want to introduce is called twice exceptional.
Mhm.
Right? So, like, again, not generalizing here. I'm talking from my experience. So I don't want to. I really want to make clear this is not. I'm not speaking for the whole of the community, because it's so diverse. So for me, twice exceptional means it doesn't mean what it sounds like, that you're 2 times better than everybody else. It means you're twice different.
Mhm.
The term is a little bit unfortunate, I would say, because it creates this thing of like, oh, I'm better than everybody else. But what it means is the deficits I'm born with that are because of my neurodivergent, the neurodivergence, I was able to compensate with my giftedness.
Mhm.
And what that means is I ended up just like somebody, like, right? So just mediocre. I went through school, was average,
Mhm.
always average, good to average, right? Never exceptional or whatever. But the deficit right here, now there's a third element. AI
Mhm.
helps me with my deficits.
Mhm.
It just gets me up a level
Mhm. Mhm.
and makes me like, where my gifts are, like, imagination, creativity, um, and that is the thing that I'm obsessed with. Like, it removes the barrier that's been like putting me like in a, and there's nothing wrong with being mediocre, right? It's like, not, I'm saying I don't want to be mediocre, but I have so much creativity that I want to express, but I don't have the tools or the I didn't have the tools to do that. That has been changing, and that's like a life changer for me.
And for me, I feel like mediocrity is subjective anyway, and like mediocre in comparison to what some artificial construct by some like government for some school system. I think as human beings, we are all unique, and we all have our strengths, and we all have things that we're great at, and we all have things we're not so good at. And I think mediocrity in itself, it's not a label we should apply to people, and it's unfortunate that it has been, and that you felt like that. And to me, you've never been mediocre, so I just wanted to say that. But I also feel quite like, I feel like warm inside that this technology that I've been a part of for such a long time, when it was very, very crude, is serving the purpose that people like me got into AI for, to help others, to make people's lives better. And to hear your story of autism and a neurodivergence, and how AI is being used for you to assist you in life, is like, wow, that's amazing. That's what we should be striving for.
Yeah, so I was really lucky in that sense, and that's why I'm obsessed. Like, I just really got into the I really got the benefits of how it can help me with my disabilities. And when I hear people wagging the middle finger, it just hurts, because it's almost like, oh, suddenly I can overcome something that's really hard, and there's somebody like alarming it's a problem. Well, there are problems, and there are ethical problems, but I think it's easy to point them out, and it's coming from a place of fear, which is, I think, unjustified, because I think a lot of editors are how can I phrase that in a more how can I tone it down? See, now I would ask ChatGPT, how can I say this without being offensive? But here it comes. A lot of editors are up their own asses when it comes to AI usage, because they are like worried it's going to take the jobs away.
Yeah.
And I've been turned away several times from, when I reached out to humans for coaching, for support with writing, and I said, I am working with AI. They immediately shut me down as like, no, sorry, I'm too good for you. I think it's bad. Anyway, there was quite a challenge to get support, but I did eventually find support. But what I wanted to say is, I would now ask ChatGPT, how can I say this without, being rude?
Yeah, I think what tends to happen is, which is the case in a lot of our society, is someone will publish some research and then it will get picked up, but only the sensationalist bits will get picked up, and then that will be the running story. And it's kind of a limitation on our society that critical thinking goes out the window, and like it's a bell curve, isn't it? On the one end you have really poor performing AI that doesn't do, like the snake oil type sellers who say it's going to do XYZ, but really it's not, because they don't understand it and they just haven't written the right algorithm. And then you have like sort of the bell curve, and then on the, in the main kind of area of it, it's just a helpful assistive tool. Like, you see it in everything, Amazon, emails. That's been happening for years. People don't even notice it. And then on the other end of the bell curve is the extremities of it's going to take over the world and you're all going to lose your jobs. And I think sometimes that's when that part of it is more vocal. People lose sight of, the parts of it that are useful and helpful that they've been using without even realizing.
I think there's also a misconception, because we see the headlines that say, oh, ChatGPT wrote an academic paper and it's published now, right? So that's the headlines I've seen, like on social media. I don't know how true or what's to it, but here's the thing. It's not like you tell ChatGPT, write a book, write an essay. It will produce bullshit. It is like, it will produce you some nonsense, like not maybe even good partially, but it's like, it's not, it doesn't have the experiential side of things, right? It cannot tell the story that you want to tell, and it's a tool. It's a tool, and more than anything, you have to create something, you have to write it, and then you have, it's like there's an editor constantly in exchange with you, shaping the content. It's not like a push a button. It's like I spent probably more time the refining and how to phrase and put more effort into making it sound better than I do when I just type and like miss words, and then somebody else has to do it for me and correct it, like proofread, edit it, and then I have to pay the person for doing that, right? And sometimes I might be able to do that, but sometimes I might not have the funds to somebody constantly checking my writing and making sure it's appropriate.
Yep. Interesting. So we have gone over a little bit. I know we said we're going to try and keep these episodes to half an hour. I just wanted to see if you had any final thoughts before we wrap up.
Yeah. So final thoughts. I think. Yeah, I think I'm hopeful that it will eventually become parts of our lives. We're at stages, and it's a support rather than taking away jobs. It's just going to make it a lot easier for us all.
Yeah. Well, I've been very kind of what have I been? I've lost my words. I need ChatGPT to help me out here. I've really enjoyed hearing your perspective and your experiences. And like I said, to reiterate again, I remember being like an 18-year-old studying AI, saying, yeah, we're going to like change the world. We're going to help people. And then I became very like disappointed and despondent when it was mostly just to, you know, used like to sell people stuff or in the financial markets. And then, you know, with the rise of like deep learning and large language models and ChatGPT, I'm so happy that it's, you know, being used as an assistive tool, and it's helping people like you and others in many ways. So I've really enjoyed hearing your story about that today. So yeah, thank you for sharing.
My pleasure. Thanks.
Great. See you on the next one. Bye.